welcome to Something to Talk About. My name's Linda McIninch, and for the next hour we are going to become one with nature. We're going to talk about the community garden and how you can be part of that community. But first, as usual, I would like to get a little bit of administrative work done. I would like to thank the volunteers that have come to help me out this evening. I need my little cheat sheet over here. We have Colleen Moore, Director Extraordinaire. Thank you, Colleen, for coming every Wednesday and helping me get the show off and running. We have Maddie Shipka, Tatiana Hawkins, Flynn Reardon, and Giovanto. So they are helping me also make the show look good. We also have staff members, Corey McNeil and Kyle Ruffin, who without them, BCAT probably would stop running. And I also, little special thank you, BCAT had their annual appreciation night earlier this month, and I would like to thank you, my viewer, for voting Something to Talk About as viewer's choice for a series. And we have reached a milestone as well. We've surpassed 50 episodes of the series, so I want to thank everyone at home for that. And last but definitely not least, I want to thank my husband Paul for staying home for daddy date night, and hopefully the kids are behaving themselves for you. There, I think all my administrative stuff is over, and now I would like to welcome my wonderful guests. We have Jane McIninch. Did I pronounce that right? No, I think I screwed that up.
Absolutely, yes.
Who is coordinator and manager of the Burlington Food Pantry.
Co-coordinator of the Burlington Food Pantry, yes.
Who helps out with Peter Copolla, who is master gardener, who oversees the relatively new Burlington Community Victory Garden. Victory Garden or just Community Garden?
No, that would be just one of the gardens.
Oh, okay. There's more than one, which we will find out a little bit. So let's take a step back, and before we actually talk about the topic at hand, would you be willing to share with me and and our audience a little bit about yourselves, how you came to Burlington, or where you grew up, how you came to Burlington, and how you got involved in the community garden, which we are now going to talk about. Well,
sure.
Ladies first.
Ladies first. All right. I grew up in Denmark. I came to the U.S. to go to graduate school many years ago, down in Georgia at Georgia Tech. Okay. When we graduated, we moved up here because there were far more jobs in biotech in this area than there were in Georgia.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So we...
A lot of things up here. I should be nice to Georgia. I have friends that live in Georgia.
Georgia is a great place to live, but Massachusetts is better. So we moved up here in '99, bought a house in Burlington because it seemed like a nice place to raise a family that we were hoping to eventually get to. And it was relatively convenient for, most places that biotech is located. Mm-hmm. Of course, since then, traffic has gotten a lot worse, so it's not so convenient
I'm still
anymore.
waiting for Star Trek to become true, and you could just beam places and get where you want to go.
That would be nice. I worked in local biotech for about 10 years before I quit, and I had my own chocolate business for about 4 years. And I decided to move on from that. Chocolate is sweet, but it's also
no pun intended, or maybe pun was intended.
Also very time consuming. But I just couldn't get myself to go back to that commuting situation, and I had really enjoyed working in the community. And I was really fortunate that it coincided with an opportunity at the food pantry, and so I jumped in, even though I knew nothing about running a food pantry, but we learn as we go. And I think Christy Ventura and myself seem to get along very well. I really enjoy working with her, and I love every day of it.
You and Christy came on the show, I think, during my first season, and both of you were fairly new at the pantry.
Yeah, it was right after we started at the pantry.
So, yeah. Wow. Excellent. Well, thank you for coming back. I'm glad I didn't scare you away. Okay, Peter, you're up.
Hey, I grew up in Revere.
Okay.
Across the street from a large greenhouse complex. Mm-hmm. The area that I grew up in was a large farm. My neighborhood, everyone had a garden, so I grew up with a lot of people farming, vegetable gardening, that sort of thing. Went to college at Northeastern in the early 70s, and that was the back to nature movement. We had movies like Jeremiah Johnson, Man in the Wilderness, things like that. So when I graduated in 1976, yeah, that's when Crockett Victory Garden first aired on PBS.
Okay, yep.
So that was, I got hooked on PBS, and when we moved to Burlington in January of '78, that was the first garden that we had. So I've been gardening now 30, almost 40 years in town.
Yeah, okay.
I've been a planning board member, a recreation commissioner, youth sports coach, all kinds of activities in town.
Man about town.
We had the Bee Cat Show, the Wannabe, gardening and woodworking, now about 10 years ago.
Wow.
And about 5 or 6 years ago, I started the weekly column Germinations and gardening column. That's pretty much throughout Middlesex
Now, where's
County.
that
It's
column?
Gatehouse Media. It's the
Okay.
Burlington Union. It's the weekly.
Oh, okay.
And again, it's been published now for a while, and it's pretty much throughout the Middlesex County. I'm teaching gardening classes in the area. So this whole community garden
Okay.
really is just the next progression with the gardening in town.
Okay. Excellent. So let's talk about the community garden. This is the second year it's been in existence
This will be the second year with plantings.
with plantings.
Right?
Okay.
We broke ground and prepared the site in 2013.
Okay.
So last year was the first year we actually had plantings. So this year is the second year.
Okay.
And the garden is actually 3 activities. So
okay.
in many respects, we truly are a community garden.
Okay.
We have Jane's activity, where the food goes to the food pantry.
Okay.
We have a leased plots, 20 leased plots where people who do not have a place to garden.
Okay.
25% of our population is apartment and condominium
That
dwellers.
much? Wow.
25%.
Okay.
So we have a lot of people, almost 4,500 people who don't have
Don't have a lawn, a yard.
a yard. So they could lease a plot for the recreation department, and then we have the school component. And there's actually a Francis Wyman garden, and there is a Fox Hill garden. So there's
Now, how do the Fox Hill kids get over there? Because
the Fox Hill
No,
have their
it's
own.
at
Each
Fox
school.
Hill.
oh, it's at
It's
Fox
at
Hill.
Fox
Okay.
Each school who wants to do it can set up their own garden. So
Okay.
so there are 3 components, and at the Francis Wyman, they're all in one location. So again, truly a community garden.
Okay, so the community garden, the proper community garden, I guess you could call it, is located behind Francis Wyman School.
Correct.
Now, you said you broke ground and you started establishing like the footprint, I guess, in 2013.
Right.
Is it still the same footprint from 2014 and this year, or has it gotten bigger, or?
It's roughly the same size.
Okay.
And we are trying to create a standalone garden
Okay.
just for the school. So it would be separate.
Oh, okay.
So they're all co-located,
Okay,
but yes, we have, the site itself is a little over 3 acres. So
okay. So how are the 3 gardens divided? Because you have the community garden plot that whatever's grown ends up at the food pantry.
Correct.
And then we have the leased part where anybody, organizations or individuals can rent,
Right.
and then Francis Wyman School. Are they, third and third and third, or is it?
No, there's a pathway that separates the people helping people, the pantry garden, versus the 20 lease plots. They're separate and distinct. The lease plots,
Okay.
each individual plot is defined, so you can clearly see
Okay.
20 separate plots, and leasees can do essentially whatever they want, plant whatever they want on the plot.
Within reason.
Within reason. No invasive species or things like that, and nothing
And
illegal.
it's gotta be
It's gotta be
legal.
legal. And the school is, right now, is using some of those plots.
Okay, so the
classroom.
school is kind of overlapping.
Right.
Okay. Now, how would someone become involved in renting a space? Is it too late to rent a space for this year?
Go to the recreation department, send to
Okay,
school.
so contact recreation department or look
Right.
on their website.
I'm sure there's 20 plots there. 2 of them are dedicated to
The school.
people with physical challenges.
Oh, okay.
So you have 18 plots, and I don't know how many are left, how many are still available.
Okay.
But it's nice to see, if you have been down there,
Okay.
you can see that people are starting to do some planting, turn over the dirt,
Soil.
or the soil, sorry. Put in, little fences and things for plants to climb on. It looks really nice.
Okay. Speaking of dirt and soil, my Girl Scouts went to go visit you recently. What is the difference between dirt and soil?
Soil is what you plant things in. Dirt is what gets on your hands and clothes when you're digging in the soil.
Now, is this a technical definition, or is this your no? I'm just laughing because you're the master gardener, and I'm thinking I'm the accidental gardener. I just put stuff in the ground and see if anything grows, and
Nope,
so that's the technical definition. Okay.
all dirt is soil. All soil is not dirt. Or is it the other way around?
Other way around.
Okay.
All soil.
Is dirt. All dirt is
No,
not
wait.
soil.
No, you had it right, because it doesn't become dirt until it's on your hands.
All
and
dirt
clothes.
is whatever.
There you go. That's how I feel.
Oh, that's just logic. Okay. So let's talk about right now the community portion of it, where the two of you, or your two organizations, are partnering. How is it planned out? How do you know what to plant? How do you know what the clients of the food pantry will want? Do you do carrots, or do you do green beans because they're easy to grow and it's impossible to kill? Or, how do you map out the...
I think we're crawling right now. We're trying not to grow vegetables that require a lot of maintenance, and we have soil that still has some rocks and things in it, so you can't grow root vegetables that go more than a few inches into the soil.
Okay.
Because a carrot,
Or else you get mutant carrots.
right? You'll have a carrot that looks like a hand, things like that.
Which my dad grows.
And that's the reason why. So we're trying to grow things right now that are easier to grow, and
Okay.
as we have some permanent beds established, then we'll start doing some things that are perennials, like asparagus, things like that. So we're trying to keep it simple right now.
So what are some of the things that are easy to grow?
Well, we planted.
I can kill anything.
No,
really
well,
easily.
we planted garlic last October. That's up and running right now. So we'll be pulling garlic scapes.
Oh, so that's like an over winter.
Yeah, you
Over
plant
winter.
it in the fall, and it comes up in the spring.
Does it keep the critters away?
Garlic is a great repellent. We had some herbs. We have to move some of those around, and we'll try to do some perennial herbs like thyme and chives and things like that eventually.
See, the sage survived.
The sage overwintered. We had some rogue strawberries that we have to relocate because they're in the middle of the vegetable bed, so we just have to.
And they kind of like to spread their wealth.
They have
too.
little
Yes,
little
you got to
children.
rein them in.
So we
We'll
have-
move them to the front,
Okay.
where they can look pretty.
And we're a little behind, but again, this is learning how to walk before you can run, but we should already have had the lettuce and cold season crops in the ground, but next year, we'll be there next year. This year was just trying to get up and running.
But we also want to make sure that we grow a variety of things, because we do have a variety of ethnic groups that attend the pantry, and we want to make sure that we have a little something for everyone. And actually, one of my favorite things that we've done in the last year is we have been able to increase the amount of produce that we had received in donations from Farmer Dave. And Farmer Dave grows a very large variety of things. And so we've actually had Amanda Moak, a volunteer at the pantry, who has been focused on helping the clients learn about the vegetables. And so she, rather than do a little bit of everything, she would just stand with the produce and the vegetables and answer any questions they had, help them understand, what are similarities between, if you got Swiss chard and you've never seen that before, well, maybe you can start out with just using it like you would spinach and then grow from there. And so she's really been phenomenal in terms of helping the clients expand their view of vegetables and sort of move beyond iceberg lettuce and tomatoes and cucumbers.
Make your salad a little less boring.
Yes, and so we want to build on that experience that she has helped the pantry or the clients gain.
Now, has Farmer Dave and his staff helped at all with the community garden, or are we just kind of keeping that separate?
So it's separate, but he is a big supporter of the garden, and I'm actually slated to go on Monday to pick up plants
okay.
for the garden. So he doesn't work in the garden, but he does help us.
Well, I wasn't sure if there was like a competition there, or if there was like a partnership, and not really a partnership, but there's a friendly neighborhood thing.
Friendly neighborhood thing, co-sponsoring and donating, yes.
Now, are there other organizations that help sponsor the garden? I know, is it the Chamber of Commerce?
The Burlington Area Chamber has taken us under their wings, so
Okay,
they're mentoring us.
okay.
Yeah, they started their charitable foundation in 2013 with a big grant on building programs to fight obesity in families and kids.
So it's kind of a whole national push on fighting obesity.
Absolutely. And so with that, their approach have been to support the garden and not just support the volunteer garden, but also support the school aspect of it, of trying to build the curriculum in the schools surrounding gardening and learning about produce and food and where does the food come from and how does it grow. You know, it doesn't grow in the grocery stores.
I just keep thinking of the movie WALL-E. I want to have a farm and grow pizza. You know. Now, is it a requirement for clients of the food pantry to spend X number of hours working at the community garden?
No, it is not a requirement for pantry clients really to do anything. We highly encourage them to volunteer both at the pantry and in the garden. This year we have actually some clients that are signed up to help in the garden. And we have clients that help out at the pantry, and all of them really express how grateful they are to be able to give back. You know, they receive so much, and this is a small way for them to give back. And it really helps build the relationship so that, you know, you are among friends, and it makes it a lot easier for them to, you know, come to the pantry and accept being in that situation when
Feel more vested in it.
Yeah,
too.
and it feels more like you're hanging out with friends instead of, you know, coming out to strangers asking for help. So that really seemed to.
And playing in the
Yeah.
wait, no, do you play in the soil or play in the dirt?
Play in the dirt.
You play in the dirt.
You got it in the soil.
Okay, so when you go to the garden to garden in the soil and play in the dirt, you can make friends.
Absolutely.
You can make other networking connections. And I think I read somewhere that studies have shown that getting dirty and playing in the soil or dirt or both actually helps reduce depression.
Well, it's a great stress
Makes
reliever.
you feel good.
It's a great stress reliever, and it makes you feel good to be out there and watch things grow, and that sense of accomplishment that, you know, you plant a seed and you see it turn into something.
Yeah.
And then hopefully later, if you take good care of it, you can actually eat it. You know, it's a great sense of accomplishment and feel good. Absolutely.
So we talked about the opportunity for the clients. Now, who else would staff the garden? Is it all up to you, Peter, and your neighbors that you recruit?
We're actually, hopefully we'll have a pergola, which is kind of like a grape arbor without the grapes.
Oh, okay.
So there'll be a nice seating area for people to get a cup of coffee, come down and just sit around and socialize, watch the plants grow, and if the mood strikes them, they might want to get up and water the plants or maybe pull a weed. So it's a nice place to just go and meditate.
You got to have classes. This is a weed. This is not a weed. Do not pull this.
The reality is, the soil is so good. The school department was great to us last year. They purchased a large amount of compost. So
okay.
the soil is so good. There's no need for fertilizer. You virtually put the
Excellent.
plants in the ground. As long as you keep them wet, they're going to grow great.
Okay.
So there's really not a lot of work to do. It's more, as I said, being there to,
It's fun.
socialize
And
a
you
little
get to
bit.
eat the profits.
Well, and you'd be amazed at the type of people who walk by who really, they initiate the conversation, what's going on, and they're really enjoying it and think it's great. So just being there, it's like it's nice. It's just nice to be there. Great people to come by and talk to you and everything. So yeah, it'd be nice if we had some more people who would be willing to bring their coffee there instead of just drinking it in the coffee shop.
Yeah, and I really want to emphasize that, we're not just looking for people with gardening skills. We're looking for everyone, especially people who really just want to come and develop relationships and friendships and not afraid to get dirty, but who, want to hang out and help us with, whatever happens to be needed, but just want to be there. And this is about building community and supporting the community.
Hence the name, Community Garden.
Garden.
So it's not just about, getting people out who...
It's not rocket science. It's
Exactly.
dirt. It's soil. Now, you mentioned that the school department acquired compost last year. Are there plans, or is there a plan in place for having like a compost bin available?
Yes, we need to progress. That would be the education element beyond just the school. But there are things that we have: rain barrels, pest controls, repellents, composting. There are all kinds of things that are available to residents in the town through various agencies of the town. We need to create an area where people can learn how to do those things. So it would be nice eventually if we had an area that had various types of composting.
You can get rain barrels in Burlington?
You can get rain barrels.
Yes, you can.
Cool. Sorry.
So these things are available. It'd be nice if we had a display area where people can see them and learn how to use each individual thing and then know where to go to get them in
Now,
town.
would the community garden be that place to...
That's the idea.
Oh, okay. So that would be like almost a museum in nature, kind of.
Again,
not a museum,
an
but-
education piece, but beyond the classroom.
An
It's just-
outdoor classroom, almost.
Well, as you're walking
Yeah.
by, you would see.
So these
several-
aren't currently in place. This is like
No.
longer.
No, this is
longer term.
Like I said, we're in the crawl stage. We're learning how to walk. Someday we'll be running, and at
Let's
that
make sure we
point-
could grow stuff first.
Right.
Let's grow it one piece at a time.
Okay. So we talked about the division. Can we talk more about the parameters? Now, there was a meeting recently, wasn't there, for anyone who wanted to lease a space about some of the rules?
Right,
So-
the people who leased the plots.
Okay.
We just wanted to go through the rules with them so that they understood that we were on school grounds, that the state requires an integrated pest management plan for both the grounds and the facilities, and we needed to make sure we complied with those rules. We're also close to our well fields, so we don't want to use any pesticides or herbicides in violation of our IPM or that may contaminate our well field. So we created the environment where we brought in the compost, so you didn't need to fertilize. We don't allow pesticides or herbicides, so it's an organic farming technique. So you're going to have to go out there and pick the bugs off by hand. We had the water
I'll let
there.
my kids do that.
So we just set up a lot of just guidelines. You don't want smoking there because nicotine in the tobacco can kill plants, so you don't want to have anybody smoking there. You don't want to have pets.
But you don't want to set your farm on fire either, you know.
No, and you don't want pets running through somebody else's plots.
Okay.
If you have very, very young children, you could try to keep them under control so they don't go running through somebody else's plots.
Yeah.
So that we were just reviewing those guidelines and
Okay.
making sure people were respectful of the neighbors.
Now, how would all of this be enforced?
It's through the recreation department, and there's a
Okay.
sign posted with all of those rules or
Okay.
policy statement there, so people know. Just looking at it,
Okay.
you don't go there at 7 o'clock in the morning, and you don't stay there till 11 o'clock at night. That sort of thing.
Wow. Okay. So, you just mentioned my next question, organic. Now, what defines an organic farm or organic garden?
Well, that's something you don't even want to, path you don't want to walk down, because
I think I already did.
the USDA, they define organic gardening as gardening in an organic manner. But,
Okay.
but production farmers can use chemicals
Okay.
on their farms, because the Food and Drug Administration recognizes that you're not going to get high production out of these farms if you don't allow them to
Use pesticides
use
or-
chemicals on the farm.
Oh,
So
okay.
as long as they farm in an organic manner, organic gardening is
Okay.
no chemicals.
Okay.
The organic label means you have to garden in an organic way for a minimum of 3 years before you get to put the organic label
Okay.
on your product.
So you won't be putting any organic labels because you don't want to go through the whole FDA thing.
Well, we're not going to apply for an organic.
Okay.
We're growing organically. We're not using chemicals. That's the bottom
Okay,
line.
there
If
you
the bugs,
go.
If the bugs want to eat the tomatoes, there's still going to be plenty of tomatoes there for the people.
Let's plant lots of marigolds, because I heard marigolds get rid of bugs.
The pungency is a repellent. Most the
They repel
primary
more than just bugs.
the
I hate the
primary
smell of them.
ingredient in repellents is herbs. So
Okay. Now, in mapping out the plot of the community garden, are strategies like that put into place, like critters don't like garlic, or certain?
we're not that sophisticated yet. Right now, we're focusing on crop rotations so that we don't have plants that don't like to be grown
okay.
next to each other are separated.
How do you find out stuff like that? Just research, or
I have like
The gardener.
yeah. well,
That's
this-
why we
Master
have
gardener?
him.
That's why you have him. Now, backing up a little bit, I don't know if I asked this already. Was this your idea to do this, or was it the
No,
Chamber of Commerce's idea? And-
This goes back 15, 16 years ago. Has nothing to do with us. It's
Okay.
not back in the 90s. It was actually a town meeting member, Frank Monaco,
Okay.
got together with then Selectman Phil Gallagher and Paul Raymond from the planning board and others, and they started the farm at what is now the cemetery on the Cementor property.
Oh, okay.
That was the garden years ago.
Oh,
And then when the town needed space for to expand the cemetery, they took that, so the garden shut down. So the original garden was actually, it's
okay.
been about 12, 15 years now since we've had it. All we're doing is resurrecting something that really Frank Monaco gets all the credit for starting.
Oh, okay. I'm just kind of relocating it a little bit.
hmm
I had another thought, and it just like, phew. Okay.
So you're getting old too.
I am getting old. Yeah, yeah. Okay. Now that I'm thinking about that, I'm like queen of tangents and I'm going in the wrong direction. When you go to the community garden, there's a shed there, correct?
Yes.
Where did that come from?
That was donated by the Leahy Clinic.
Really?
That's
Okay.
part of that whole mentoring that the chamber
Okay.
is doing for us.
So they're pulling, now it's a grant from the chamber that's funding this? I mean, what are some of the expenses that you need in running this farm? If it's mostly volunteers farming it.
Well, you need equipment, wheelbarrows,
Okay.
shovels, rakes, trowels, things like that.
Okay.
Place to store it, that's why the shed's there.
Okay.
Beyond that, it's just the volunteers. Oh,
Well, you gotta buy the
purchasing
seeds,
plants
but-
yeah,
seeds
most
and
of
stuff.
the
Now, is
people,
everything
every
grown
year.
from seed, or do you have to get like?
it depends on the
some-
crop.
Okay.
Some of the plants that take a long period of time to grow and have to grow at a specific temperature
Okay.
have to be started indoors. That would be your tomatoes and your peppers and your eggplant. These are warm.
Your warm weather plants.
Okay.
So if you try to plant them from seed outdoors, by the time they're ready to set seed, it's already too cold and they're going to die. So you
Okay.
need to start them a couple of months in advance so that they fruit during the warm
So
weather.
do you usually get like volunteers to?
Well, that's where
start
Farmer
them?
Dave has been great
Oh,
for
okay.
us.
Yeah.
Okay.
So those are the types of plants that we'll get from Farmer Dave.
Okay.
And then, with different crops grow well in either cool weather or hot weather. And so there are some of the beds that are slated to be planted later in the summer for more sort of fall vegetables. And so those beds, we're going to start out with planting lettuce, which is a quick crop that, we plant it now and then we harvest that, and then we have plenty of time to turn the bed around and replant it again, so we can get 2 crops out of the same planting bed.
Cool. Okay.
So we will plant some, even though you could easily do the lettuce from seed, we're actually going to be planting it from plants from Farmer Dave, just to sort of shortcut the season a little bit so that we can get more stuff in there.
Okay, longer term, would you be looking for volunteers to start plants in their homes to transplant them?
That would be a great way to get involved.
Okay. I know I can't use my house because my cats like to eat plants, and plants do not stand a chance. It's like, okay, you either get eaten alive or you go outside and freeze. Sorry, plants. So, out of the supplies that you just mentioned, how often do some of them need to be replaced? Like, you'd think shovels and rakes can often be reused from year to year, wheelbarrows.
Well, with proper maintenance,
Okay.
we'll never have to replace them because we don't have excavation at the site. We just have tilling of the soil and raking out the beds. So they should last forever. It's really just buying seed stock and
okay.
things like that.
You know, the hose would probably
garden
need to be
hoses break,
replaced.
yeah.
Yeah. Now, who pays for like the water? Is it well water or is it?
It's the water that is used on the fields, the soccer fields, the playing fields. They just
Okay.
run a tap from there up to the garden.
Okay.
So it's the water that's
So
already
it's
out.
not that much. Okay. Now, longer term, the shed's there. I think at one point you and I were talking off screen about hoping to get a fence built around it, around the garden.
Yeah, so we're talking right now with the school committee about coming up with a design and a way to put a fence around the
Okay.
garden to keep critters out. We want to
Okay.
respect that we own school property and make sure that we do things in line with,
Okay.
what they want to see for their property.
Because I was
So-
wondering, what the purpose of the fence was, to keep critters
Well, it's
out,
both
for
to,
aesthetic
to-
purposes, to map out
It's
what it
got
looks like
multiple
and-
purposes.
Okay.
It's both has a aesthetic. It defines the garden.
Okay.
But also, it will help keep critters out.
Okay.
So it's got multiple
What
purposes.
kind of critters does that area of town get? Because, my backyard is like, Wild Kingdom.
Burlington has a lot of wildlife right now, but it's mostly what they call edge animals. These are rabbits and woodchucks that they walk along the edge of the wooded area
Okay.
and then come out to eat and then run back in so they don't get dive bombed by a hawk.
Exactly.
So-
Which we also have plenty of.
Yes, I got some very cute pictures of rabbits up there last year.
Oh, fun.
So
I was driving here and there was a little bunny in my front yard eating, eating clover or eating something.
and they pretty much have gotten accustomed to us, so we're no longer predators for them. We're just a nuisance for people, preventing them from eating. So, and that's
You're the
essentially
food
it.
supply now.
You know, a lot of people are talking about the coy wolf, the coyotes,
Which we have a lot of those.
but and it's a coy wolf. It's a combination wolf and coyote.
Oh, okay.
This goes back 10,000 years, but that's
Okay.
a different story. But a lot of
I love stories.
Our coyotes are actually Bellerica's coyotes, are actually Bedford's coyotes. They're not,
Okay.
you know, there's probably 2 dens in the 3-4 town area. So and they're carnivores.
Okay.
So they're
So they probably won't
patrolling.
be threatening the tomato plants.
They're
at all.
not going to eat any of the vegetables. They might eat the edge animals that
Okay.
eat the vegetables, and that's okay. So they're actually our friend, except you don't want your little cat there or something like that.
Or your small child.
Oh, you're a small child. Turkeys, we have a lot of turkeys,
Okay.
but they do more roosting, and turkeys, especially the young, eat insects, and we want them to eat the bugs and insects, so they're our friends.
okay.
Birds are our friends. I just wrote an article.
Birds aren't my friends. They eat my strawberries.
Well,
And they'll eat part of this strawberry and part of the
you have
strawberry.
to talk to them. You have to go out there and have a conversation with them, and they'll leave your strawberries alone. You just have to work. You have to get out every day and have that kind of talk. You know, you turn the soil and say, "Here's a worm. Leave my strawberries alone."
Okay.
That's how.
And
it works.
my daughter's great at worm relocation.
Well,
I do worm
have
eviction.
her go.
She does the
Have her go out with the birds.
relocation. She's like, "Mommy, dig a hole. I want to find a worm." And she picks up the worm and brings it to the other end of the garden.
There you go.
You know, crops. I know we already talked about this, but you know we were talking about certain. Grow corn on the cob at all? Corn?
You really want to stay away from corn. Corn
Why?
it's a water hog. It's a pest, not a fertilizer hog. It needs a lot of nutrients. And you need to plant it in a grid. You can't plant like a couple of rows of corn because it's air pollinated. So if the
Okay.
wind blows across the row,
okay.
the pollen's going to go
That way.
that way and not pollinate the ears of corn. So
Okay.
corn really is something you go to the supermarket and buy 5 or 6 for $1 and save the aggravation.
Go to the farmer's market.
Go to the farmers. We have a farmers market.
That's right, we do. Now, are you being as any of the proceeds or any of the crops from any of the community garden area going to the farmers market?
I think time will tell. You know, if we get a bumper crop, you know, and it becomes more than
Won't be corn.
what the pantry can use, we've started talking with the market people about, you know, potentially selling some of it at the market and then the proceeds feeding back into building the garden. And so, you know, it will grow as
So it's still kind
as
of
the
an
season
experiment
develops.
because it's
Yeah.
like, how do we know we will have an abundancy of a certain crop?
Exactly. So
And if we
last
have-
year
okay.
we were partly because of, you know, we were just getting started with the garden and
Mm-hmm.
it was a awful spring, cold, wet, and so, you know, all growing was off anyway, and so it's not a good indicator of what that garden is really capable of doing, so
Okay.
we're really still learning.
Now, speaking of crummy weather last year, do you see this horrific winter that we're just coming out of? Do you see that impacting this year's crop at all?
It's not the winter, it's the lack of water. We're already 4 inches below average.
But we had 7 feet of snow.
Isn't that amazing? That's all down in the aquifer now, all gone. We're 4 inches behind. The garden itself
Really?
is dry. Check out, go in your yard, just turn your own soil. You'll find that the lawn is dry, everything's dry.
Wow.
We're 4 inches below average right now.
Wow.
And that was, the snow was still on the ground 5 weeks ago. And now we're 4 inches behind, below average. So anything you plant now, you're gonna have to
It
water.
rained yesterday.
0.02
Barely.
inches.
Really?
Yeah.
Because I was coming out of my daughter's school right as it was like torrential.
Yeah, it was on the news tonight, 0.02 inches.
That's it?
Well, the city of Boston, where they met Logan Airport.
Okay.
So yeah, that's the winter had really nothing to do with it, other than some people were delaying starting their seeds indoors.
Okay.
But in terms of when do you plant outside and everything, that's just business as usual.
Winter is past.
Stay with,
It's got nothing to
stay
do
with your
with.
schedule.
Okay. Now you said staying away from corn. What about crops like Pumpkins.
You have to
Pumpkins
have
are good.
pumpkins. Halloween. You need pumpkins.
Cool. Because I know squash is like kind of a popular crop. And I think the only thing that I've been ever able to grow in my yard is zucchini.
No, squash plants. Well, this whole city was a farm. We're not a city. I'm sorry. This town was a farm prior to World War II. We were almost 100% farming,
Wow.
and the biggest crops were things like the Hubbard squash, the pumpkins, things like that.
Well,
So
the squash family grows really well in this area,
Okay.
so absolutely.
Oh, okay. Now, how will, we talked about Farmer Dave helping with, and some of the produce that through the CSA is donated to the food pantry. How do you think those donations will compare to what is actually grown in the community garden? Now, because you had mentioned if there's a surplus of produce, do you really anticipate there being a surplus, or will it be kind of different crops, or?
Well, it's the thing with fresh produce is that you have a very short window from the time you.
It's like a short shelf.
Yeah, a short shelf life.
shelf-
It's not
thank
like
you.
a can of beans that can sit on the shelf for 2 years. You pick it and you want to, eat it that day. And because of the way, we are a food pantry, and even though we are open 3 days a week, not all our clients come in every week.
Oh, okay.
And so there may be times when between all of the sources that we have of fresh produce, we end up with more than what we can use.
Okay.
Because of a new regulation that came in place in Massachusetts back in October, a lot of grocery retailers are now really starting to donate a lot of their fresh foods, which both includes the fresh vegetables, but also bread and other foods.
Okay.
And so, it all adds up. And, last year we got about 4,500 pounds of vegetable and fruit from Farmer Dave.
Okay. Oh, that's a lot, I think.
It's a lot.
Seems pretty big to me.
It's a lot. Last year we got about 800 pounds from the garden. This year we're expecting that to be much higher. So when you add it all
Because we know what we're
together-
doing now.
We know what we're doing.
You guys know what you're doing now.
We're also, so, it all adds up, and it all depends on timing, when things are ready versus, when things are coming in from other sources.
Now, we talked about, again, going back to crops. It's like my brain is just stream of consciousness. Most of the stuff that we're growing now is are vegetables. Are there plans to incorporate more fruit eventually, like maybe put a couple of apple trees in? Is it worth it? Or blueberry bushes or raspberries, which just like explode and grow everywhere? Or?
Well, again, that's when we get up to the run stage.
Okay.
We certainly have the space available. We just need to figure out whether or not everybody's willing to endorse putting those there.
Oh, okay.
But then you start talking about things, when you talk about fruit trees and stuff like that, now you start talking about organic sprays. You need to do dormant sprays. There are things you need to do.
Okay.
And as you pointed out with the raspberries, you've got the runners, the suckers coming up everywhere.
Okay.
With the strawberries, we need to actually make beds so that the daughter plants that pop out away from the mother plants stay within the planting beds.
You can do that?
You can do
Yes.
that.
You can also clip them and replant them elsewhere.
So,
That's what I've been doing.
but that's, now you're starting to talk about labor, and when you start to talk about labor, now you're talking about more volunteers. So, yeah, certainly once we get up to the running stage, we can start
Okay.
talking about things like that.
Oh, I like talking about things that are in an ideal world. Like,
In an
what we-
ideal world, everybody would be growing their own vegetables in their backyards.
No, they'd be growing them in the community garden. Because we're one happy community, and we're all
We
going to go
are.
and have a nice cup of organically grown coffee. It's free trade accessible, or what is, anyway. Okay, I digress. Again, are there any fundraisers that need to happen that you would like to see happen to help out the community garden, like to pay for some of the plantings or to pay for, eventually, like a fund to eventually, like a capital fund for a greenhouse or for sprinkler system or...
Well, I don't think those things would happen there, but that's beside the point.
Any plans for a fundraiser for any reason? For either the food pantry or the community garden?
There are no solid plans for fundraising.
Okay.
We've had various ideas that we are discussing,
Okay.
but there are no solid plans. I think one thing that we want to do later in the summer is to actually have sort of a community meal at the garden.
Oh, that would be neat.
To show it off and
Okay.
but there's no solid plans at this point. And the pantry is just coming off of a number of fundraisers, the most recent one at
okay.
Tuscan Kitchen.
Okay.
And so I think we're sort of moving into the summer lull in terms of fundraisers. We'll be back in the fall. What we are doing at the pantry right now is last weekend was the big postal drive.
I don't remember ever getting my postcard, but I'm looking out the window and all the neighbors have like little boxes and bags hanging from their mailbox. And I'm like, yeah, I think I missed something. So
Yeah, so we got
So how
about
did that
we got about 6,000 pounds of food, which is now being stored at St. Margaret's. They very graciously lend us space
okay.
to do a rough sort last Saturday, and this Friday, the 15th, everything
Okay.
will be moved to the pantry. And so if anybody is looking for something to do Friday morning between, say, 8 and 1,
okay.
come to the pantry and we will be sorting all that food and getting it organized and put onto the shelves.
Okay.
And later in June 26th, we get our second installment of a big donation from Wegmans.
Ooh, okay.
They pledged when they opened their store back in October, they pledged 3 installments of 6,000 pounds of food.
Okay.
We received one in October. We're getting one on June 26th,
Hmm.
and then one will be later in the summer again.
Okay.
So again, if anyone is looking for something to do on Friday, June 26th, give us a call at the pantry.
down. Okay, now when I was preparing for the show, we'll talk about more volunteers in a minute, but I had a hard time finding information on the community garden. In an ideal world, I mean, we were talking about earlier volunteers to come and help weed and help get dirty and play at the garden. Would you need any help in designing a website or monitoring a Facebook page or tweeting, or are there any other aspects where you would need volunteers other than to go and have fun getting dirty?
We would love help with that. We do have a Facebook page, Burlington Community Garden, that I started, but I'm not very good at Facebook. So I would love help with that,
I
so
could go home
that
and friend
things
it or
get
like it or whatever I'm supposed to
posted
do.
on there regularly and it stays alive. And
Gardening plants
I
alive.
have not
love
yet
it. Oh.
dared venture into Twitter, but
Yeah, I'm too afraid to
Yeah,
start tweeting.
but I think that we would really like to at some point start a
Okay.
website. Again, that can sort of elaborate on the 3 components to the garden. It's not
Okay.
just the volunteer garden, but it's a bigger picture.
Oh,
And have a one sort of one-stop shopping that you can learn
Okay.
about all three components.
Okay.
And we can add in some of those extra educational pieces. People could go there, and that could link to where you could go buy the compost and the rain barrels. And so absolutely down the road, we would like that. Again, that's
Because I'm
not,
also thinking down the road, it might be kind of cool to have like one of those big compost bin things for, if you forget to harvest some of your stuff and you have half-eaten, bunny chewed. Do bunnies eat tomatoes?
No.
No. What do bunnies eat? Half-eaten carrots or
we eat
what?
greens.
Greens, okay. Half-eaten greens that you really don't want to share your dinner meal with bunnies. Just throw it in the compost bin that's already there so you don't have to take it home. Or is that even necessary to have a bin there, or can you just pile up compost and...
Right now, we're composting in place. We have a pile,
Okay.
but we need to fix a spot at the site to compost all of the material at the end of the year. We don't want the beds to go to sleep dirty. We want to clean them all up in the fall.
Okay.
So we do need a place to let that stuff decompose over the winter,
Okay.
which would be separate from the composting bins, the various type that are on display, although some of that material would be used in those bins.
Okay. Now, we talked about volunteers for the garden. Can we go back to that and talk a little bit more? Now, I know Colleen has the phone number if someone is interested in becoming a volunteer and coming down to the garden and checking it out.
Well, when the garden's up and running, if you know anybody that's, say, in the Girl Scouts,
Okay.
and their troop wants to come up and pull some weeds or water some vegetables,
Okay.
that's an option.
Okay. Now, is there a minimum time commitment that someone needs to make? Like, they have to volunteer 2 hours a week, or, hey, we're free next Friday, can we come and spend 3 hours at the garden, or whatever?
Well, I think we need a little bit of both. I think
Okay.
we need people who are willing to commit to, a certain task or a certain amount of time every
Okay.
week or every month. But it's also nice to throw in those larger groups,
Okay.
that if you set up a volunteer day and you get people in and you can accomplish a larger task, as opposed to, there are bigger tasks that needs to happen as well as just things that needs to happen on a continuous
Okay.
basis.
So don't let the time commitment thing scare you away.
Exactly. We need a little bit of
know.
both.
Call and you guys can discuss availability and what role that volunteer might be able to play.
Yes.
Okay.
And again, you don't have to have gardening skills. If you have people skills or
Just can't be OCD
Socials.
and worried about getting dirty. Sorry.
we need it. We need everything.
Okay. I had another thought, and it just flew away from me again. Keep talking. Talk about something. I lost that thought. With volunteers. I've
Girl
lost
Scouts,
it.
Boy Scouts.
Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts.
Church groups, companies.
Okay.
If you work in Burlington and your company wants to go out for a day or spend a few hours, we had companies last year that did that. They came down and played in the soil,
Yay.
And they got dirty.
and they got dirty. And,
Okay. Washable.
And they had a great time doing that. Church groups, youth groups. We can use them all.
Now you had this is what I was thinking. I believe you mentioned earlier that in an ideal world, everyone would have his or her own garden. Now moving toward that utopia, would the community garden at some point create some kind of like a classroom setting where people could go and learn about gardening?
We have that. In this spring, we have 3 gardening
You
courses
do? Okay.
through the recreation department. We have a seed starting class. We have
Okay.
a 3-hour general, cover everything, 15-minute snippets, and then we have a 6-week, 2-hour session, so 12 hours, which is a subset of the Master Gardener class I took. So I took that
Okay.
course, skinnied it down to 6 hours, and we teach that through the recreation department.
Okay. Now,
So-
does that actually take place at the community garden, or
No,
is it
it-
like at the library or the rec center?
It's at the
or-
rec center. We teach it at the
Okay.
recreation center. Someday, eventually, as the town does its facilities realignment and things like that, maybe if we can find a place to put a lean-to greenhouse in a classroom, that'd be awesome. But, that's, again,
I'm not going to
when
hold
we're
you to
running.
any of this stuff. I'm just, thinking
No, it's-
here, stream of consciousness. And
What people need to start recognizing is that with the drought situation in the Pacific Southwest, where 90% of the produce for this country comes from during the summer, with the drought in the South America, where our winter fresh produce comes from, with the droughts in the Pacific, where a lot of our fruit comes from, we need to start thinking about converting lawn space to food production again.
okay.
We need to start looking at generating our own product here. And that's
Okay.
that thing that the chamber sponsored a couple of months ago at the seminar, this 50-60 movement that was started by the University of New Hampshire,
Okay.
where 50% of our food product will be produced. That's dairy, meat, fish, and produce by the year 2060 will come from within New England.
Really?
So
Okay.
there is recognition that we're in a world of hurt.
Okay.
I think at the resident level, people need to start understanding that at some point they may show up at the supermarket and not find the asparagus there every single week because asparagus is not seasonal.
Okay.
Well, and there's a different component to that as well, that, there's starting to be a recognition of the food at the supermarket may not be what we think it is, The fact that it's
okay.
grown under, subpar conditions with, doesn't have all
Pesticides
the pesticides, herbicides, it
kinda
doesn't
gotta
have all the
wonder about-
nutrients the plants
Yeah.
need. So the nutritional value of that produce is not what it should be. It's traveled a very long way to get to you, and some of those nutrients starts degrading as soon as you pick it.
Okay.
And so by the time a week later that it gets to your local grocery store, some of all that nutrient is long gone. So I think there's been a recognition that it's not what it used to be, and it's not what we think it is, and that there is a really tight connection between obesity, diabetes epidemics, and the lack of nutrients in our diet today. And so,
We need to get
those things combined, really, we really need to start taking a serious look at what we eat and where it comes from.
And this is a perfect first step. And we are out of time. So I do definitely want to thank you guys. Thank you, lady and gentlemen.
Thank you for
or
inviting us.
guys,
Thank you for
for
inviting
coming on and talking about dirt and soil and plants and veggies and all that is fun and happy. Thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to checking out the community garden this summer. And I also want to encourage you at home to check out the community garden and start to help lead a healthier life. And I want to thank you for joining us this evening. I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did, and I look forward to seeing you around town. Have a great evening. Thanks. Good night.